Welcome back to another toxic best friend story time. A little background information. I was friends with this girl since elementary school, and we had a really good friendship until we got into high school. Like, we always got along, never fought over boys. Well, during our freshman year, this new boy started at our school. Well, I started talking to him. And after a month of still talking to him, my best friend goes, "I don't think you should talk to him. He talks to a lot of girls." And because she was my best friend, I didn't think she would lie about that. I believed her and I stopped talking to him. Well, that weekend, I went over her house. And when I walked in her room, she goes, "Oh, say hi." And who else is on the phone but the boy she told me not to talk to? So after they got off the phone, I was like, "Let me guess, you told me to stop talking to him because you liked him." And she goes, "Yeah, I just knew that if I told you I liked him, you wouldn't stop talking to him." So that night, we went to a party and he was there. And things started to go south, like for part 2.
Story time of how I caught my dad and my stepdad sleeping together. So a little background information, my mom and my real dad got a divorce when I was around 4. So like the typical, on the weekdays I'd be at my mom and on the weekends I'd be at my dad's. Then when I was around age 6, my mom married my stepdad. And since they got married at such a young age, I called my stepdad dad and my real dad dad. This story ends up with a lot of confusion and chaos, so just get ready for that. So everything started to get a little weird when my stepdad went to go drop me off at my dad's house one day. My stepdad actually went into my dad's house and they talked for about 5 hours. You see, I went to sleep and then the next morning my stepdad and my dad were both making me breakfast. And then I overheard my stepdad on the phone with my mom saying that he had an overnight shift. So I didn't say anything because every time I tell my mom something, she ends up believing my stepdad anyways. Because my stepdad's always right? Anyways, the next time that he dropped me off, my stepdad ended up staying again. Then I ended up walking into my dad's room seeing both of their pants off. I'm running out of time, for part 2.
Story time. My toxic best friend outed me to the entire school. So one day, one of my best friends from a neighboring school decided to move to my school, and she was extremely upset because her best friend over there came out as bi. So I ended up using this as an opportunity to come out bi as well. And she was like, "Well, it's okay for you. I just got really close to her." We'll call the girl Becky because no one likes a Becky. And we can call her friend Heather. So fast forward to after the situation had calmed down, we decided to all go prom dress shopping. So Heather and I were talking and we really hit it off. And I think Becky legitimately forgot about our sexuality because we were all talking about how much we have in common and we brought that up as well. She just looked at us and was like, "Oh, I forgot about that." And she just shrugged it off. But we continued to hang out for a few weeks. One of these weekends, we all went to church together, and the sermon was about how God accepts you no matter what your sexuality is. But of course, Becky turns around to us and says that Heather and I could never date because it would F everything up. Later that day, Heather actually ended up admitting that she had feelings for me, and this is when Becky lost it. Stay tuned for part 2.
Part 2 to my most recent toxic best friend story time. Little background information. I told him the reason why I didn't want to talk anymore was because I just didn't want a relationship. So we get to the party and him and his friends were there, so she went over to them. And I went and talked to other people because I just didn't want it to be awkward. Well, an hour later, we all met up again, and I started having a conversation with him. Well, I guess my best friend didn't like that, so she started embarrassing me in front of everybody. So she starts talking about how my clothes don't fit me right and I look like a block, and how my boobs are so much smaller than hers, and how I don't have an ass. Literally in front of everybody, just embarrassing herself. And me. So after that, she went to the bathroom to throw up because she had way too much to drink. And him and I started talking. And he was like, "Why wouldn't you just tell me that you didn't like me?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I just didn't want a relationship." He goes, "Oh, well, she just told me that you like somebody else." So that was the last straw and I just left her at the party.
This is the time I had a racist Uber driver part 2. So we were all bumping to Pop Smoke, and we were all teed. So we decided to mess with him. We started asking him random questions, like, oh, how do you like driving as an Uber driver? Or what's your craziest experience with Uber? So we get to chit-chatting, and then my friend Mike decides to like pretend that he was a drug dealer and starts bragging that he bought a brand new 2020 Audi with his dealer money, which he didn't, and he's not a dealer. And the guy's like, yeah, I've definitely had my fair share of drug dealers. And we were like, how did you know? Like, what happened? And he was like, I've picked up my fair share of black people. And I was like, excuse me, sir, what? What did he say? But not for real, I was tight. I was like, excuse me, what? And I was like, so, like, what, how? And mind you, I was like teed. And when I'm teed, I kind of just say what's on my mind. And I was like, so you think every black person is a drug dealer? And he was like, pretty much. So when he goes to drop us off, I poured out my leftover fettuccine alfredo in his car and screamed he was a racist piece of shit.
This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open. She's like, I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either. Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later, they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asks her, you ever see any ghosts walking around your attic? Her face got completely serious, and she's like, you know, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated, and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years.
Part 2 on how me and my stepdad were doing the nasty and my mom walked in on us. So like I said, my mom went to work and business started as usual. My stepdad was in the living room picking a movie, so I came down from my room and cuddled with him in the couch. We started making out, and all of a sudden my mom was calling my stepdad's phone. He tried to answer, but I took his phone and put it on do not disturb mode. I wanted him all to myself. I got on top of him and things got real. All of a sudden we were both on the couch undressed going crazy. And just when we were about to start doing the nasty, my mom screamed, "Get off of her!" My stepdad and I both jumped up and I was shocked and terrified. He ran to my mom saying, "Please let me explain," and my mom slapped him. Like for part 3.
Part 2 of how my best friend got so weirdly obsessed with me that she plotted to kill my boyfriend. So continuing with the story, we heard a knock at the door and it ended up being her. And she said, oh, I'm just coming by to check on you and make sure you're okay. Mind you, we were at his house. And he looks at me like, what is she doing here? So I asked her to leave, and then she ends up getting so mad at me just because I asked her to give us alone time. So the night goes on, and then when I get home, she's in my room. At this time, my whole entire family was out of town, and I was the only one home. So I was like, hey. It was literally just like a normal night, and then I go to shower, and when I get back out of the shower, she's gone. And then my boyfriend calls me, and he goes, why is Maddie here? She had like this black mask on, but she's stupid enough to not realize that we know it's her. And I mean, we're being real here. She was my best friend at the time, so of course he's not going to call the police on her. But she had a knife in her hand, and he opens the door and he like pins her against the wall and then calls 911, I guess. And then to sum it up, when they get there, she tells them everything that she was going to do, and then they put her in a mental hospital. But she said that she was going to murder everybody that gets close to her.